Hello, welcome to the first and only episode of the Iwo Jima podcast. My name is Zane Fry. I'm going to open it up talking about why Iwo Jima matters in history. I'm going to set the stage talking about why we entered the war, why we chose Iwo Jima, and then the next section I'm going to be talking about is our invasion on Iwo Jima. And then after that, I'm going to flip it over to Logan, who's going to talk about what?
The brutal battle of Iwo Jima.
All right, and then after he's done talking about the brutal battle, my name's Adam, I should say that first. I will be focusing on the iconic moment that's captured by Joe Rosenthal. That, of course, is the raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi, and I'll also talk about the fate of the flag raisers.
And my name's Daniel, and I will be talking about the aftermath and legacy, how many casualties were involved on both sides, the gains from the battle, and the reflection.
All right, and after that, we're going to wrap it up. Go ahead.
All right, Zane, so why don't you start us off with some historical context from Iwo Jima?
All right, so as we know, the U.S. did not start off as a part of World War II. They entered after being attacked by the Japanese, and we were attacked by the Japanese because prior to us entering, Japan was trying to expand further, invading China and French Indochina, which includes Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And they wanted to do this for resources in order to fuel their military and their economy. And us, being the U.S., we opposed this expansion and promptly put a sanction and an embargo on Japan. And Japan feared this, and they had feared economic and military collapse. So they felt they had to act quickly in order to continue their expansion on Indochina. So they bomb us, obviously. They bombed Pearl Harbor, and they believed that this moment for our military would be so crippling that we would not be able to enter the war. We'd be too busy rebuilding. So Japan continues its expansion as we are dealing with the fallout of Pearl Harbor. But this backfired for Japan because Pearl Harbor actually swayed public opinion on the war. So promptly the next day after Pearl Harbor, we enter and we start mobilizing on the Pacific Front.
So what was the importance of Iwo Jima for America?
So we entered the Pacific Theater, and the thing is about the Pacific Theater, you've got several islands scattered throughout. You've got the Marianas and you've got the volcanic islands. And when it comes to these islands, there are several strongholds and kind of checkpoints that the Japanese had set up. So regardless of where we wanted to stake our claim throughout the islands, we at least needed to clear these so we could move freely between them. And prior to Iwo Jima, we would be trying to bomb mainland Japan using long-range B-29 bombers from the Marianas. And we found out that this isn't really the best course of strategy because many of these would either get shot down or just run out of fuel on its way to mainland Japan. So the U.S. Navy was ordered to occupy an island on the Nanpo Shoto, also it's the volcanic islands. And it was decided that Iwo Jima would be this island of choice, mostly because Iwo Jima is halfway between the Marianas and mainland Japan. So Iwo Jima would not only act as an emergency landing space for bombers, it would also be a base for escorts who would protect these B-29 bombers. Also, the Japanese had radars on Iwo Jima that could warn the mainland about incoming bombers. And bluntly, Iwo Jima was just used as a staging area for mainland invasion. All right, one secondary source that mentions the importance of Iwo Jima is a source named The Second World War. It's a review article by Donald G. Schilling. And Schilling quotes saying, "A tiny island halfway between the Marianas and the Japanese home islands, Iwo Jima housed airfields essential to the escalating United States air war against Japan. The mainstays of that war, the B-29 bombers, needed to be free of harassing attacks launched by Japanese fighters stationed on the island, as well as having emergency landing possibilities on Iwo Jima. Replacing those Japanese fighters with American P-51 Mustang fighters capable of escorting the bombers to Japan would be a major benefit."
Thank you, Zane, for setting the stage. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how the invasion begins?
All right, so first what I'd like to say is that prior to us even invading Iwo Jima, we had actually carried out occasional bombing raids on Iwo Jima as early as June 1944. But, as the Navy declared that we wanted to take Iwo Jima specifically, the U.S. Navy then began bombing them more frequently, and at one point the U.S. Navy was bombing Iwo Jima for over 2 straight months. And around this time, I'm going to put in a primary source of bombing footage that was taken by the Department of Defense, or the Department of the Army. It's actually bombing footage on Iwo Jima taken from December 8th, 1944 to December 12th, 1944, and was compiled from 47 to 64. But regardless, we were bombing them for 2 straight months and figured, that prior to us invading, we should bomb them and soften them up before landing. And bombing truly picked up on the 16th, which was 3 days before we invaded, because on February 19th, the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions landed on Iwo Jima.
So who was the general in charge of the island?
So the general of Iwo Jima was General, I'm going to try not to butcher this, Tadamichi Kuriyabashi.
Okay, I read that he started evacuating the island from all civilians 6 months before the invasion, and they started digging in trenches on the island. Did that play a part of why the invasion was so easy at first?
Yes. So his command, Kuriyabashi's command over the island, is kind of why it was so easy for the U.S. to invade initially. Because all in all, we dropped 70,000 U.S. troops on Iwo Jima versus around their 21,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I will note, at first, there was no resistance, though. Like the terrain was very
they said it was almost like BBs, walking on BBs.
Right. It was volcanic ash terrain, and as you got further in, there might be fortified defenses, but at first it was just ash. And according to a source, Byron Citron, who did a memoir called My Last Violent Act, he mentioned how Iwo Jima was a rock island with limited places to collect sand or soil, and there were a quantity of caves caused by thousands of years of pounding by surf. I actually have another primary source that shows a picture of this terrain. It wasn't found out who filmed it. It was compiled by Orville B. Lefko in 2013, and it's a picture of Iwo Jima. It's some American soldiers navigating the terrain, and that will be shown throughout.
So after the initial landing, did they face any sort of resistance? Right.
So I did mention with Kuriyabashi that they kind of held out, and so did Daniel. He mentioned that they kind of dug in and held out further into the island. And the source I mentioned already, Citron, mentioned that there was line of sight gunfire covered every square foot of the Marines' landing. So basically, they knew we were landing. They knew where we would be. They just waited until we all touched down on the island. He says that the resistance was unwavering once we did touch down, and caves were cover for enemy machine guns. And there's another soldier that actually journaled his time on Iwo Jima, but he didn't touch down until March. So he spent time on like a warship prior to touching down, so he was able to journal what he heard from the ship as we were touching down. His name, if I can find it, was Harold Raskin, and his journal compiles his time from January 2nd to August 20th, 1945. And a quote that he said was that when we came out on deck, and this is talking about when he's on the ship, when we came out on deck, it was dark. That is, it was night, but it was by no means dark. Star shells, artillery, flamethrowers, and tracers lit up the island in an eerie, pulsating light. Another quote he has is, all that night, the gunfire from ships offshore and the gunfire on land continued. It was a spectacle, gigantic, awe-inspiring. Sleep was impossible. So basically, while we might say that the landing itself was fairly easy. The battle by no means was easy, and that will be documented further once we get to the next section.
All right, thank you, Zane, for wrapping up the first two sections. Now, Logan will tell us about how the battle itself was very brutal.
All right, so we're going to start off with the assault on Mount Suribachi, which Mount Suribachi is a volcanic mountain located on the southern tip of the island, and it gave the Japanese a great vantage point over the Marines. The 5th Marine Division assaulted Suribachi. That began on February 21st, and they had to push through very heavily fortified positions.
All right, and approximately how long was the assault on Mount Suribachi?
It was about 2 days long, and after that assault was done, they took the famous raising the flag picture on top of Mount Suribachi.
Yeah, I'll actually be covering that more in depth in my section.
Okay, and a source named Army Boots on Volcanic Sands digs into how the battles were fought. A lot of the battles were fought through tunnels and caves and night ambushes. And
so is that kind of about what Daniel and I talked about, how they dug into the caves and we kind of had to find them instead of them finding us?
Yeah, we essentially had to find them. Sometimes we would close into caves and then use flamethrowers to basically push them out or either kill them. All right, so the explosives would actually seal them within their caves, and the Japanese would refuse to leave their caves or be demanded that they be killed. Some psychological toll. There was constant sniper fire, mortar attacks, and various attacks at night, and the terrain was very difficult to maneuver around. And
well, I think you mentioned some artillery fire. You have a couple pictures of like a howitzer and an anti-tank gun, right?
yes, and we'll pull that up here.
Right.
And I'll wrap it up and send it over to Adam.
All right, thank you, Logan, for talking about the brutal conditions of the battles, including Mount Suribachi during the war. And following Mount Suribachi was the flag raising, which Adam will now speak on.
On February 23rd, 1945, I'm sure many of us have seen this iconic picture of American soldiers holding up the American flag, which looks like to be on the battlefield. That was actually taken in Iwo Jima, and there was not one flag being raised, there was actually two. The picture that is more iconic was the second flag. That's the more famous image, and it was taken by Joe Rosenthal. His image was actually awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Photography, which is one of the highest ranking awards a photo can receive. Both flags were raised on the same day, but the first one was too small, so when they found this bigger flag, the second flag raisers were sent up to Mount Suribachi to raise it. The first flag was photographed by Lois R. Lowry, and now I'm going to focus more on what this picture symbolizes for the American culture. I believe that flag symbolized strength and faith for the troops, and it gave them hope seeing that flag being raised. The American morale did not stop being raised after this battle was over with. Today, many people are still inspired by this picture, as it reminds Americans of the hardship soldiers went through during this battle.
All right, so you've told us about the iconic image, but what many people probably don't know about is the fate of those flag raisers following the picture.
Right, okay. So there are 6 flag raisers raising the second flag, and those include Harlan Block, Harold Keller, Franklin Solsley, Michael Strank, Harold Schultz, and Ira Hayes. What's interesting about that is up until 2016, John Bradley was identified to be a part of the flag raisers, but as I mentioned in 2016, they found out that it was Harold Schultz actually.
I think that's crazy that we went almost 70 years with not knowing, everybody who was attached to this
Right.
image.
Right, and more on the flag raisers. Three of the 6 flag raisers actually didn't make it out of Iwo Jima alive. Harlan Block, Franklin Sousley, and Michael Strank were all killed in action in Iwo Jima.
All right. Is there any extra information you can give us on the flag raising, like any sources or anything like that?
Yep. There's a quote from my one source I found titled "Army Boots on Volcanic Sands," which says, "The Army raised the American flag on the neighboring island of Minami, a scant 35 miles southeast of Iwo Jima. I found it interesting that Iwo Jima was not the only volcanic island in the Pacific the Americans did a flag ceremony on. At the time, I think a lot of soldiers needed hope or drive to keep pushing forward, so they used these ceremonies to keep the American spirits up." So the battle on Mount Suribachi was probably the more iconic battle of Iwo Jima, and following the battle on Mount Suribachi, there's no really significant battles from February 23rd to March 26th. So I'll send it over to Daniel, who's going to talk to you guys about the aftermath.
Okay, so according to the Pacific War, 1941 and 1945, the 36-day Battle of Iwo Jima resulted in over 26,000 American casualties, including 6,800 dead, making it the only U.S. Marine battle where American casualties exceeded Japanese casualties, though Japanese casualties were 3 times higher than the U.S. killed in action. Only 2 Marines were captured and neither survived. The battle also saw significant naval losses. The USS Bismarck C was the last U.S. aircraft carrier sunk in World War II. It went down with a 20 FM-2 Wildcat fighters, 11 TBM Avenger bombers. The USS Saratoga was heavily damaged by kamikaze attacks, losing 31 F-6F Hellcats, 9 Avengers, and 132 men, and it was relegated to training duties.
That is a mouthful.
The Marine Corps War Memorial is often called the Iwo Jima Memorial. It's based on Joe Rosenthal's iconic photograph of the 6 Marines raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima. It was dedicated in 1954 and stands near Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. The memorial symbolizes valor, sacrifice, and unity, honoring all Marines who've given their lives in the service since 1775, not just those at Iwo Jima.
All right, so to recap, we have talked about how we set the stage for the Pacific Theater with the Japanese and the embargo and Pearl Harbor. We've talked about what the initial invasion looked like. We've talked about how the Battle of Iwo Jima was fought during those few months. We've talked about the raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi and how that's kind of still felt throughout today with Joe Rosenthal's picture. And we've talked about the aftermath and legacy that we left at Iwo Jima, whether that be the casualties or the memorials that we have here on our soil. All right, and as we know, to end World War II, we did eventually end up dropping 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, which can kind of be attributed to what we did on Iwo Jima, because between where we took off for the bombing and mainland Japan with Nagasaki and Hiroshima, there was the island of Iwo Jima. So had we not taken this island, it might have been harder to go from point A to point B and successfully complete our mission. And the war as we knew it would have been different had the battle not gone our way and had we not ended it when we did. And so really, when you look at the Battle of Iwo Jima, it was not only a small victory for the U.S., it eventually did lead to our overall success in the Pacific Theater and in World War II.
Thanks for giving this a listen. See ya.